Hey, Jen, welcome to the show.
Hey Ben, so good to be here with you.
Jen and Ben, we're going to have some fun today. We were just
Hey,
talking
so
offline. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm a double N and you're a single N, right? Have you ever
That
met
is
any
true.
double N Bens before? Because I
I
know a
have
double
not,
N.
but I know they're out there. I've actually
Yeah,
never met, well, I have met a double N before, but it's not very common. So I like the uniqueness of your name.
yeah.
Well, we were talking offline that our paths have crossed so many times online, and we've spoken at attended similar conferences. We never really connected in person until today. And that is so awesome because we're both FDNers. We both love FDN and Reed Davis and all the things they do. And we're going to have a great conversation because I believe your story is so relatable to people that might be going through something similar. So why don't we start there? Pain to purpose is your story, like so many people in our space. So let's rewind to the early days when you had so many health challenges. What led up to that, and what were some of your findings as you started to uncover those symptoms that were manifesting?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was really frustrating because I've always kind of considered myself to be a health minded person. I mean, growing up, for example, we had a garden where we grew our own vegetables, and my dad would get up and go running in the morning. And when I was in kindergarten, I would hop on my bike and go bike while he was running at like 4:30 in the morning. And I've always just been physically active and eaten like a very, you know, nutritional like diet. I would say, like, my parents were not really into processed foods a ton. We always had like, a protein, a starch, and a vegetable on our plate that was, it was pretty clean for the most part. And when I went to college, I was so fascinated and interested in the concepts of health that I actually majored in kinesiology, which is the study of the human body, and had an emphasis in fitness, nutrition, and health overall. So, like, I took all the biology classes, physiology, nutrition, and all that stuff, and honestly thought I knew that everything that there was to know about being healthy. And that was all flipped upside down for me as I actually went through college and started accumulating different health issues over time. Like, looking back now, I realized that I was struggling with things like chronic fatigue. I didn't know what to call it at that point in time because I just felt exhausted all the time. And when you're a college kid, you just think that you're exhausted from your schoolwork and, having a part-time job. And I was doing an internship and all the things. But now in that reflection, I can recognize, like, oh, my adrenals were probably tanked and I had thyroid imbalances and all kinds of stuff going on, that was probably more of like chronic fatigue of what I was experiencing. And I also started to develop really severe seasonal allergies in college, which was the thing that kind of struck me initially as like really abnormal because I had grown up in Northern California around farm fields where pollen and all that stuff is super high. And then I went to college in San Diego, which is by the coast. So, not as much pollen and all this stuff in the air. And in San Diego is where I really started to develop these really severe seasonal allergies that would manifest into like ear infections and like just totally wipe me out
Wow.
over time. But the real kicker, Ben, was when I was diagnosed with skin cancer at the age of 24, approximately. And there was no rhyme or reason to it. Like, I had no family history of any related cancers. Like, the dermatologist, doctors couldn't explain it. And at that point, I was already experiencing this, like, scenario of going to the doctor, being told that everything looked perfect on paper, like my cholesterol, my blood work, all the typical markers. Like, the doctors would literally tell me, like, oh, you're the picture of perfect health. I wish all my patients were like you. You exercise, you eat healthy. But like, I didn't feel that way. I was really like starting to struggle with some things. When my first career was in the fitness industry after getting out of college, I was a personal trainer and then moved up in management in a big, global like fitness company. And I was really struggling as a trainer. Like, I was drinking a double Americano every afternoon just to keep my eyes open when I was, training clients. And it was really starting to wear on me. But the skin cancer thing was like this light bulb moment of, okay, there's something like deeper that's wrong here. And I'm sure Sean Croxton. He's
Yes.
our path too. Sean Croxton's been like a great mentor to me along the way. I actually met him in college, and that's how I got into personal training.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
it was really funny. Like my last semester, I was trying to figure out like what my career was going to be. And one of the classes that I had, we had to go do like an internship. And so I picked the gym at San Diego State to intern at and shadowed him as a personal trainer. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I could be a personal trainer. You can really make a living doing that. So that's how I got into it. And then of course, Sean got into functional diagnostic nutrition. And I heard him do a webinar with Reed Davis, and it was like all the pieces just fell into place. Like, listening to Reed talk about the physiological aspects of the body was so insightful to me. I was like, I took physiology and nobody talked about like adrenals and hormone balance and how that interacts with the gut and how that, interacts with detoxification and all these things. And so I immediately dove into the FDN training. And as part of that training, as like we have to run some of the tests on ourselves to experience it. It's like the practical exercise piece of it. And those tests revealed like all kinds of hormonal imbalance. I had really high oxidative stress and a very congested liver, which are, two huge components that will lead to things like damaged DNA cells and cancer, essentially. So I was like, oh, this is what's going on. Like there's a bunch of metabolic chaos going on in my body, regardless of quote unquote doing all the right things. And so luckily I was able to like get my hands on those pieces of my health puzzle, change my lifestyle, reverse things. And here I am with you today, over 10 years later, almost 15 at this point, and have been skin cancer free like ever since. And I go out in the sun all the time. I live in San Diego. I love to vacation in sunny tropical places. I am not like crazy about wearing sunscreen. And so it's just proof in the pudding that like your lifestyle is what dictates the outcomes of your health, essentially,
What a story. Yeah, I love it because you're right. It's not the sun that was the problem there that caused the skin cancer. It was the terrain. It was what was going on underneath. So saying that, the sun is bad for you, causes skin cancer, or saying exercise is bad for you, it's too much of a stress, or I hear people say fasting is too bad for you because it's bad. It's a stress. It's not really the stress. It's how your body adapts to it. And you were
Right.
not adapting because your stress bucket was so full. But I'm curious because you lived a fairly healthy life growing up. You mentioned it, you ate pretty clean, unprocessed foods. What were some of the major contributing factors that led to that diagnosis and all, the chronic fatigue and all the symptoms you were having, the oxidative stress, the liver congestion? What were those major findings?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to reflect back and you can start to string together all the pieces of the puzzle. And like when I work with clients in the beginning, we will go through a process of actually starting all the way at the point of birth, because whatever you're experiencing right now in your health or at any point in time is an accumulation of things that have happened over your lifetime. And even when we're in the womb, whatever our parents are being exposed to, we absorb a lot of those things, right? So when I look back at my story, there was clues early on that I had, some metabolic chaos going on inside my body. Like when I started my menstrual cycle, I had painful, irregular periods from the beginning.
Is that why they put you on a birth control pill?
Exactly. So like, that's the answer that everybody gets. And so I was on birth control for 17 years.
Wow.
Which, we know now like totally disrupts the HPA axis and hormone balance and all those things, not to mention the toxins and the burden that it has on the liver and the GI tract, the digestive system. So that's probably a big piece of the puzzle for me. Even though we ate like clean in the sense that it wasn't processed foods, we weren't exactly eating organic. So it wasn't organic chicken, organic vegetables. I mean, we grew them in our own yard, but who knows what was in the soil there. Having grown up, in Northern California around farm fields, I was probably exposed to like pesticides and herbicides. Also looking back, like in the housing tract that we were in growing up, there was huge power lines and things that were running through that space. So probably a lot of like EMF load or radiation type of stuff going on. And also, trauma is a big piece of the puzzle, I would say, for most people, and definitely myself as well. Like my parents decided to split when I was in second grade approximately. And it was a pretty rough divorce and separation. And my mom also then kind of progressed into becoming an alcoholic, and she actually died of alcoholism. So that was very traumatic and stressful for a long period of my life that, probably burned my body, created that internal stress that we talk about.
How old
And
were
so
you when your mom passed?
she passed in 2016
Mm.
at the age of 60. And that was this. So like she had actually been diagnosed as being terminally ill a few years before that because of liver failure, went into hospice, actually started seeing a liver specialist, got better, was sober for a while, and then relapsed. And so it was kind of this like stop and go, trauma that was happening for like quite a period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, so you're pretty much explaining like the perfect storm, and that's typically what happens. And you know that you work with so many clients, and it's not one thing that's going to
Mhm.
send you overboard. It's a combination of a lot of things, which is this perfect storm. Was
Yep.
mold a part of this story at all? Did you have any mold exposure?
Yeah. So mold is like the second stage of my health journey.
Fun.
Um, And, as I tell clients, like, even though we do all the things, like if you, like I got to a place, I was skin cancer free, I was doing all the things, like life still happens, right? We can't predict things like water damage happening to our house, which is what eventually happened to me. So I, went through FDN, like got my health back on track, was feeling amazing, like hit, 30. I was at my best weight, looking and feeling great, got married that year. And then during that time also transitioned like kind of out of corporate, working in the corporate world, into being an entrepreneur, an FDN practitioner, starting my business and working from home full time. And a couple years, like about 2 years after working from home, my health started to go off the rails again. Like I just had really random stuff. Like I had gained about 15 pounds slowly over the course of 2 years, which is really hard, for people to like see as a problem when it happens so slowly, and I was like kind of ignoring it, trying to like, oh, I just need to exercise harder or get clean. Like maybe I'm not being as like, particular about my diet. Maybe I need more detox supplements. So I was like trying to do all the things still again. And then it eventually got to the point that it wasn't just my weight. Like I started having cystic acne, and like I never had acne in my entire life. Not even going through puberty as a younger person. And also just having like, even though I was on the birth control pill, I was having breakthrough periods, and I was like, this is weird. Like what's going on? And having really like a lot of breast tenderness happening too. So it's so interesting. We've been conditioned to think like we need to go to the experts and look externally for answers. And I was still kind of caught up in that, some of that conditioning, even though I was an FDN practitioner. So I started seeking out like all the local like women's health specialists, like went and saw some of the top doctors here in San Diego, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. Again, here I was in this place. I literally, you'll get a kick out of this, Ben. I had one doctor I went to, and she was like, well, maybe you've just put on 15 pounds of muscle. And I was like, do you understand how hard it is for women to like gain muscle? I mean, in my earlier years in my 20s, I actually used to do fitness competitions. And even with a super strict like training routine
Yeah.
and dieting regimen, I was lucky if over the course of like 8 weeks, I gained like 2 pounds of muscle,
Yeah. You
so I'm
would
like
know
15.
if you put on 15 pounds of muscle because you would be working your ass off, even for a
I was
guy.
do I look like a bodybuilder? I don't think so. And I was just like so disappointed by that, like, and they're like, well, maybe we'll just keep an eye on it. And here I am thinking, I've had skin cancer before. Like, what if this is breast cancer? Like,
Mm.
what is happening? So I'm really into like spirituality and the divine interventions of the universe sometimes. And I was like literally at my wit's end, and just like praying for an answer. And literally, like, I was sitting at my desk one day and I opened up the closet next to me to get some materials out to ship to a client, and look up, and there, like, the whole ceiling of the closet was like black.
Oh
Like there
my
was just
gosh.
black mold.
Oh,
And it made sense. Like, actually, what was really fascinating about the story is our black lab started having really severe digestive issues before, like, as progressively as like I was starting to have health issues. Well, if anybody's ever have a lab or most dogs, they're by your side all day long.
Yeah.
So here I was working from home at my little makeshift office in our guest room, sitting next to this moldy closet for hours and days on end. Like, and my poor dog was in there with me all the time too. And it was impacting him as well.
What symptoms was your dog having? You said digestive system symptoms, but what were they exactly?
Oh God. I mean, he had so many. It's actually years later what he passed away from because we could never get him back to like normal. But in the beginning, he had what did they call it? It was like protein losing enteropathy. So he dropped like 8 pounds over the course of, I don't know, like 6 weeks or something. Cause so he basically like this condition was like he wasn't able to absorb nutrients through the GI tract essentially. So we actually had to put him on a course of some really high like anti-inflammatory like corticosteroids. I forget what we put him on exactly in the beginning because it was quite a while ago. And like we worked with a holistic vet and she was like, you know, we know that we both are kind of like averse to medications like that but there is a place and time for them. And she's like, he's going to die if we don't put him on steroids like right now. So it saved his life.
How old was he at that time?
I'm trying to think back of, so we got married in 2013. So this was somewhere probably, I think we discovered the mold in maybe like 2000, somewhere between 2014, 2016. So it was a while ago. So
by the way, the reason I'm asking is because I have a similar situation, or I had a similar situation where I lived in a moldy home, had a dog. He started getting really fatigued, but also for the audience if you see your pets like kind of having symptoms, it could be a clue that there's some environmental things going on. It might happen to them before it happens to you. Yeah.
It's like the canary in the coal mine situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally. So looking back on it now, I'm like, oh my God. So I'm with our animals that we have now, we have another dog and we have 2 cats. I'm like, anything that's going on with them, I'm like, is this a sign? Like, what do I need to be paying attention to? But, so we got him, he kind of got back on track and then he had symptoms of like SIBO stuff. He was sensitive to all kinds of foods. I mean, Ben, like I ran all of our FDN tests on him. We did an HTMA test. We did GI maps on him. There's like a variety of different like food sensitivity testing for dogs. So we were doing that, doing food rotations, cooking all his food at home, he was getting all organic, all the things. And, eventually what happened with him is that he had, what they call bloat. Basically, it happens in larger breed dogs, very common and say like, especially larger breed dogs have larger chest cavities. Yeah. So like German Shepherds, for example, and a lot of German Shepherd puppies, they will proactively, when they're younger, like laparoscopically, like staple their stomachs to their side so their stomach doesn't flip because that's what happens with bloat. So he had an instance that after we kind of recovered him from the protein losing enteropathy thing, year or so later, he had a stomach flip. Stapled his stomach to the side. We were good for a while. And then eventually it flipped again. And then it flipped like multiple times over the course of like a short period of time to the point where like his intestines were rotating. We never could figure it out. Like it was trying to think of everything. I think it was really hard to tell, but I think that he had intuitively, my sense was that he had a version of SIBO where there was probably a leaky valve. You know, when we have that kind of inflammation over time, the elasticity of the tissues and everything we lose some of that elasticity. And I think that he had a leaky valve that was going on because what was happening is that his stomach and his intestines would just blow up with like gas, essentially air, and they couldn't figure out why. And then from the pressure of the air coming into the intestines and the stomach, it would cause it to flip. So like, yeah, it was like a really long kind of sad story, but
that's
taught
for you. Much. That's an emotional stress plus the mold, physical stress. Oh, yeah. So that had to have an impact on your health.
I mean, yeah, big time. It's like the mold. So getting back to like the mold and everything with me is that, looking at that and the symptoms that I was having, like the cystic acne, the weight gain, the breast tenderness was all like, or, correlated really strongly with estrogen dominance. So mold can like cause elevations of estrogen in the body, basically. And also because it's blocking detox pathways, so you can't move that estrogen out. Those types of things then triggered thyroid imbalances, Hashimoto's. So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, but
Mm,
with everything that we know as FDNs and working in the functional world, I was able to like reverse that Hashimoto's within 6 months,
awesome.
essentially, and have been able to keep it under control naturally without medications and everything like that. So even though we encounter, these obstacles throughout life, like we can't predict something like we said earlier, like mold, there is an opportunity to overcome it, and get back to feeling like your best self. And so that's where I'm at today. And who knows, maybe there's more in my future, but I have the tools to get through whatever that might be, basically.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. And it's a really important story because mold is a hidden problem for a lot of people, especially I live in Florida. You could imagine the amount of people that are sick in Florida from mold. And it was my story too, 2015, very similar to you. I had mold in my home and I was there working from home. My dog was working, not working from home, but he was there every day.
I mean,
And
he was
yeah, I guess
working.
he was working. And he started to get, I noticed he was like fatigued. He wouldn't want to go on long walks anymore. I'm like, what's going on? He was only like 5 years old. I mean, he's still alive now. He's sleeping right here. He's great now. But back then it was like, he's 5 years old. And why is he getting tired? And then I'm getting tired. And like you, I was also, I was doing personal training at the time and I had a CrossFit gym at that time. And I was doing the espresso shots too. Very similar story. I was like trying to stay awake as I would
Yeah.
drive to clients on the highway. And I figured out for me, it was two things. I had 8 silver fillings in my mouth that were leaching mercury into the brain. And then I lived in a moldy home. So number one, biological dentist, removed the fillings, did detox to get the metals out. Number
Yeah.
two, we remediated, but I was still uncomfortable being there. I ended up just selling the house and getting out of that environment. And that's what makes mold like one of the nastiest things to deal with. It's one of my, if I had to deal with like diabetes, okay, we could take care of that. Pretty easy to take care and reverse type 2 diabetes. Heavy metals, we could detox you, but mold is so nasty. And sometimes people have to
Dude,
leave their environment. Isn't it just a nasty thing to deal with?
it's really hard. And since that initial mold finding, we've actually, like, we went through a process of remodeling our home. And when they remodeled our kitchen, they didn't like seal one of the pipes correctly. So then we had a leak in the kitchen and we had to break through a lot of like the beautiful kitchen that we just remodeled. And then even somewhat recently, like we found some mold outside of my office here from like the watering system and the plants. And it's stuff that you don't tend to think about necessarily. And the hard part about it is that one, if you're a renter, there's no regulations like laws really that I know of, at least, unless anything has happened new, that regulate how landlords have to address water damage. We have things, I mean, think about all the hurricanes that we've had, especially on your side of the
Yes.
states, right? And like all the water damage that happens with that. And there's just not a lot of great information out there. And the thing with mold also is that it is amplified by
I want
EMFs.
to take a quick break from the video you're watching to share something with you. If you've been following me on social media or any of my online platforms, you always see me wearing these glasses. And I always get asked the question, hey, why are you wearing those tinted glasses? Well, these are blue light blocking glasses, and they are very beneficial to protecting brain function and being productive throughout your day. If you're like me, you are surrounded by artificial light every single day, from the computer screen, phone screen, artificial lights, and your brain needs to filter out the junk light. We're just not designed to filter that out. And it's a lot to filter out. So the analogy is this. If you had a computer open in a web browser with 100 tabs open in your web browser, and hey, that's probably you, your computer is going to function slow. It's going to dysfunction and it's just not going to be optimized. But what happens if you take those 100 tabs and close them all out and just maybe leave a couple tabs open? Your computer is going to function better. This is the same thing with your brain. When you use high quality blue light blocking glasses, you filter out the extra junk light so your brain doesn't have to do so. A result, you feel better, you think clear, and you have a more productive day. And that is why I wear these glasses. The glasses that I'm wearing and that I recommend is from Bon Charge. They are a sponsor of this channel, and they make some really cool, high quality, well-researched blue light blocking glasses for the daytime, like the ones you see me wearing now, and for the nighttime that are more orange, red tinted. So at night, I switch over to those. They have cool styles like the ones you see here, and also clear frames as well. They have reading glasses. You could get your prescriptions in those glasses, and they have a whole range for you. So all you need to do to get your hands on a pair of Bon Charge glasses or any of their wonderful products is head over to boncharge.com/KetoCamp. Use the coupon code KetoCamp at checkout and save 15% off your entire order. We'll drop a link and the coupon code for you down below in the video notes. So go ahead and get yourself charged up with their awesome products. Okay, let's go back to this video.
In a modern day world where we are surrounded by EMFs. And so when you've got mold in the home, EMFs amplify the growth of mold within the home or the environment. And they also amplify the growth and proliferation of mold in the body as well too. So that's been, I don't know if you've actually done work in that area, but I've worked with some specialists to come out and evaluate, radiation, body load of EMFs and all that stuff in our home and in my office to help my body detox and get rid of the mold and recover from those exposures that we've had over time.
I love that you do that. Yeah, absolutely. I do. And I have found that when we start to get into these conversations, and I love these type of conversations because it's not just about nutrition. Me and Jen both agree diet and exercise alone is not going to get you well in this day and age. But what I've come to find is that when we get deep into these conversations, people start to there's a group of people that start to feel really overwhelmed, and they start to think, there's no way I could get healthy with all these things going on. But I want to reassure you that the human body is so incredibly strong. And think about all the hits that Jen has taken and all the hits I've taken, and the body still goes. So just identify some of the interference and start knocking it away. And I want you to kind of expand upon that for those who might be listening or watching, and they're just like, I give up. There's no way I could get healthy with all these things they're mentioning. What would you tell that person?
It's just starting with one thing at a time. And let's just take a second here to talk about the exercise piece of this, because I didn't know that you had a personal training background I didn't necessarily. So funny, again, our paths. But I'm curious with you, from that exercise standpoint, having gone through something like mold, looking back, one of the symptoms that I was experiencing was not recovering well from my workouts, right? One of the things that I'm a runner, I love to lift and I love to run. And when I was going out running, my legs just felt like dead weights. It was so hard to run. But I didn't know that I had the mold stuff going on. And I just thought that I was gaining weight because I wasn't being compliant, enough with my exercise routine, or I wasn't working hard enough. Right?
That's exactly it.
So what's interesting is that mold actually, part of that experience is because mold affects your circulation and specifically the capillaries at the surface point. To help flush out lactic acid and that kind of stuff. So that's where those lead weights, my legs feeling like lead weights came from.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That makes a lot of sense though.
Right? Yeah. Recovery standpoint. But here's the thing is that this is actually exercise intensity. When I work with clients is actually one of the first things that we dialed back. Because the hard part is that, especially if you come up in the fitness industry or you're a fitness fanatic like you and I have been, is that you just think harder is better, more is better. It feels good to work out. So many people that I talk to, I go, what do you do daily to de-stress? And they're like, well, I exercise. So we utilize exercise in this, all these very specific ways. And the reality is that what I had to learn to understand and embrace is that when your body is experiencing a load of stress, and we have to redefine what stress is not just mental, emotional stress that we commonly think of. It is mold in your house, potentially. It's toxins in the environment. It's not sleeping through the night or staying up late. It's eating foods that might be inflammatory for your body. It's the metal fillings in your mouth, right? So all these things contribute to this burden of stress on your body. And typically when we exercise, like, exercise is a good kind of stress, is how we want to think of it. The body responds to build stronger bones and muscles. But when we're in this burdened, depleted state and we're exercising intensely, it's like you're digging yourself a deeper hole, because your body doesn't actually have the resources available to rebuild the bones and the tissues and all the things to create strength. You're just adding extra stress onto the platform, basically. So like, part of my recovery process and part of the rebalancing for my clients has been, actually toning down, cutting back the exercise intensity, focusing on more restorative types of movements for a period of time to lift some of that burden on the body. And then once it gets into a better state of balance, now we can bring back the exercise intensity and get into that stuff that you really love doing, like lifting or running or whatever it might be, basically.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's what it's about. What you're referring to is hormesis, right? It's like staying in this hormetic ceiling, and a small stress that you adapt to is great. Your body gets stronger. But if your stress bucket is so filled up with chemical stress, emotional stress, and physical stressors, all the ones you mentioned and others that are out there, then just doing a 30-minute HIIT workout or even a 60-minute CrossFit workout, I want to talk about a tough workout, that your body's not going to adapt to that. And I had the same challenge. I would be sore for days, and I'm thinking, what's going on? I'm training consistently. It's not like I take a week off and then I train, but my mitochondria was not adapting, and it makes sense with the circulation and the lactic acid. I didn't know that. So it was like ding, ding, ding. But I remember, Jen, this is when I didn't know that I had mold in my home and I was living there, but I did Murph. Are you familiar with Murph, that CrossFit workout at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, I think it's 1 mile run and then 100 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, and then 200 push-ups and then 300 squats and then another mile run, something like that. I might be off a little bit. So I remember doing it on Memorial Day because that's when we used to do it. And I got home that day. I did in the morning. I was out of it for 3 days. I had brain fog. I was so sore. I couldn't even move. I was essentially out of it. And in the past, I was able to adapt to that, but it's like I pushed myself too much, and that was a stupid thing to do. So I love that your mindset is not add things, but let's remove things and then go from there. So that's a great, great tip.
Yeah. And especially if you are not sleeping through the night or getting good quality sleep and not sleeping according to your circadian rhythm. Right? Like I'm like, we have to fix that before we can, like, that's going to help you have the reserves in order to do the exercise. It's going to help. That's where that's our recovery time. So we have to fix that before we just like dive into the exercise, which is the opposite of what most people think or do, right? Like, I think we're recording this right before the holidays. Like, think of how many people through the holidays are staying up late. They're indulging in foods, and the mindset is, I got to go like burn it off at the gym the next day.
Or I'll start on January 1st. I'll do whatever damage I can do right now. It doesn't matter. I'll start January 1st, right?
So this totally depleted state, and now you're going to go like run yourself into the ground at the gym, which is exactly what I used to do. Totally guilty of it, know? And this was like when I said that I would reverse my Hashimoto's in 6 months, dialing back the exercise intensity was actually a really big part of that. Like when I got that diagnosis of Hashimoto's, I immediately went to like an AIP diet. I altered some of my supplements. I bumped up my detox stuff, like working all these things, but I kept my exercise intensity the same. And I was making like marginal progress, but I wasn't really making leaps and bounds. And that's when I had to shift my mindset around exercise and give myself permission to do lower intensity, more restorative style of exercise. So I committed to 30 days of just walking and yoga. And when I did that, the pounds started falling off and I made more leaps and bounds in the healing process.
I don't know if you knew this, but the number one cause of why people don't feel well on keto is actually an electrolyte issue. When you lower your carbohydrate intake, which is fantastic, you lower insulin and glucose. So your body's going to shed extra water weight. You're going to feel lighter, less puffy, all good things. But here's the problem. When your body releases excess water weight, the kidneys actually go through this diuresis process where it actually releases very important electrolytes. This is the leading cause of the keto flu, and also why people just don't feel that well on keto. There's a simple solution: high quality electrolytes. And yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that make salt and electrolytes and minerals, etc. But my go-to is from Upgraded Formulas. It's called Upgraded Charge. Many reasons why I love this product. Number one, nanoparticle technology, meaning the absorption rate is insanely high and efficient. Upgraded Formulas Upgraded Charge contains potassium, magnesium, zinc, and sodium. The taste is fantastic. It kind of tastes like a non-alcoholic margarita, and the flavor comes from the lemon peel. Simply unscrew, put it into your water or carbonated water, drink it, and get those electrolytes up efficiently. Since you are a subscriber of this channel, you can get Upgraded Formulas Upgraded Charge and any of their products for 15% off. Head to upgradedformulas.com and use the coupon code KETOSIS at checkout to get 15% off your entire order. Okay, let's go back to this video. I love that. It's such a valuable tip. And you're right, most people don't teach that, especially these fitness pros. They're just like, just a matter of eating less and moving more. You're a glutton. You got to just move your body. And that does not work. Maybe it worked 30 years ago, but there's too many factors right now. Hormones are what really matters, not calories. So
Right.
what do you use to track that? I know I see you have an Oura ring on. I have one too. Would that be a good gauge? Like, do you use that? Or like, do you use HRV, looking at their deep sleep? What are some things, some metrics, not just how you feel, which is very important, but what are some things we could look at, like numbers wise, to see, okay, today might be a good day that maybe I could push myself a little bit versus I should kind of just do more of a stretching and foam rolling?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that devices are great tools to get some of that biofeedback to create consciousness and awareness around what's going on with your body, because all of us are kind of moving through life on autopilot or with this conditioning going on about what we think is healthy, or, trying to keep up with the rat race of what everybody else is doing. So devices have been really helpful for me. And the Oura Ring is something that I definitely love. I think it was probably one of my first, biohacking type of devices in a sense. And because I like to look at it like it gives you this readiness score in the morning time, which I equate to like, it's your gas tank. So all the input from the day before and all the work that you did, and including your sleep and everything, like how full is your tank every morning when you get up? So you can look at that readiness score and go, oh, I'm operating with a full tank, like based on yesterday's activities and last night's sleep. So I can, maybe go a little bit harder today, versus if that readiness score is on the lower side, you're maybe operating with like half a tank or 3/4 of a tank. So you need to go a little bit easy on yourself, right? Getting some of those insights about sleep. Like, are you consistently sleeping through the night? Do you have disrupted sleep? Like, what time are you going to bed? Super helpful information. I also really like doing like spot on in the morning, like my morning HRV. So I have one of the polar chest straps. I use an app called Elite HRV, which I think can connect with a variety of different HRV devices. So I always check in on that. It gives you on a scale of 1 to 10 what your HRV is, and it will tell you specifically based on your number if you're more sympathetic, so stressed, or if you're more parasympathetic, like in a deep recovery. So it's really interesting. Like when I, work with my trainer and we do like the day before, if I do more like Olympic lifting type of stuff, then the next day, like I can trend sometimes with an HRV that's more parasympathetic, which means that I'm in a deeper recovery mode, basically. Cool. Or recognizing like if I'm more sympathetic, then I'm in like this stress state, which tends to more correlate with like just work stress in my life, like what's going on essentially. And so it's great input to bring that awareness. And the thing that I say all the time, and we kind of say this as FDNs too, is like any test is a snapshot in time, right? So I say like with the devices, yes, utilize them to bring awareness, just like we use functional lab tests to bring awareness. And at the same time, you need to correlate it back to the person. Yeah. Because there have been instances when my Oura Ring or my HRV score reading tells me that I look like a champ in the morning, like I look like a 10, but I actually don't feel that way.
Same.
So I got to like check in with myself. And those are the days that I'll decide to go for like a nice long walk with the dog, or like do some kind of different exercise, not hit the gym really hard. Or, the reverse, like they'll come back looking like really crappy and maybe I feel great,
Yeah.
right? But either way, it's like this pinpoint in time that's bringing my awareness into my body so that I can make a choice, a conscious choice about what actions I'm going to take for that day.
Yeah. Well said. I agree. There's so many benefits to using these tools like an Oura Ring or HRV or a continuous glucose monitor, all these amazing biohacking devices, if we want to call them that. And I think they are. But you don't want that to be the only piece that you want to pay attention to. It's also how you feel. Same thing with, like you just said, some days I wake up and I'm like, man, I feel really good. And then I go, I put my Oura Ring on my little stand because I always have it on airplane mode. And then I go look at my score. I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, that's a bad score, but I feel good. So am I going to let this determine how I feel today? Or am I going to listen to myself? Or it's the opposite way. So I love that. It's so important. And that goes with lab work too. It's not just, you're not treating paper, you're putting all the pieces together. And I want to transition the conversation to one of the most common questions that I get, which is about acid reflux, but we'll relate it to the whole conversation on digestion, but we'll start with acid reflux. Why exactly does this occur? There's most people think it's you have too much acid, so we need to kind of we need to taper that down. But what is the root cause of acid reflux, and what can we do to overcome it?
Yeah, I would say that, it depends on the person. So I've seen, having worked with hundreds of clients at this point in time, I would say that the number one most common correlation that I see with acid reflux is an H. pylori bacteria overgrowth going on in the gut, which is really interesting because H. pylori itself, it like eats up stomach acid. So it actually lowers your stomach acid, which then you have this acid reflux because it's the digestive system trying to respond and digest food, produce that acid reflux. But what is if you go through like traditional medicine, conventional systems, they're going to say, oh, acid reflux, you need an antacid, right? Like a Prilosec or whatever it is that they prescribe. It's like the opposite of what you actually need. And so people will get some relief from that in the beginning, has been my experience. And then over time, it builds back up, basically, because we're just perpetrating the problem, essentially. So I find that when clients really address that H. pylori bacteria overgrowth, get rid of that, then the digestive system and the stomach acid can normalize, that goes away. And then the other thing that I see it highly correlate with is eating inflammatory foods, specifically things like gluten and dairy or grains in general, soy, sugars, that type of stuff. Like my father-in-law is like a great example of this. Is he's, struggled with acid reflux basically his whole life, was on those antacids. We did testing and work together. He had H. pylori bacteria overgrowth. We addressed it. Acid reflux went away. And now the only time when he experiences any time of like indigestion, it's because he ate something that he shouldn't have, like some gluten or something like that,
And that's good that his body gets a symptom. It's like the body showing you the innate intelligence. It's your check engine light. So thank God we have that, but we don't mask it. That's the problem. To your point, Jen, it's like somebody's been eating gluten, seed oils, and pasteurized cow dairy for months and months and months, and they have acid reflux. They go to their doctor. The doctor doesn't ask typically, what are you eating? Like, these probably are contributing to that. They will just write the antacid prescription, or they'll go and get some Tums. But that's not just getting to the cause. That's just masking the check engine light.
Exactly. It's just a Band-Aid, like as usual.
As usual. So so you said too much H. pylori is one of the main causes you've seen of acid reflux. I would agree with that. I also had an abundance of H. pylori that I discovered through FDN, actually, when I was doing testing. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about H. pylori, because it's not something we're ever going to or want to get rid of completely, but when it's too much, like kind of like Candida, that's when it's problematic. Could you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, I would say that it is a primary bacterial overgrowth that I see in most people that I work with. It's exchanged via saliva. So we're constantly like, especially if you have partners in your life, you're like swapping it back and forth, kids, whatnot. But to your point, Ben, is like, in the natural ecosystem of our digestive system, we have all kinds of bacteria in there. We have good guys and we have bad guys, but the ideal scenario is that we keep the good the good bacteria abundant and we keep the bad bacteria low. And the good bacteria, like your probiotic type of strains, helps to balance everything and keep it under control. Your immune system helps with that. Your lifestyle helps with that. And so when these quote unquote bad bacteria, we're just going to label them as that, start to overgrow is when they can really become a problem, because they do, produce toxic, elements in the body. They produce like stress and inflammation, or something like H. pylori, like we just talked about. It actually disrupts the balance of stomach acid, which reduces your ability to digest nutrients and foods as optimally as possible. So now we get into this like nutrient depleted stage, and then it's this vicious cycle that just has this cascade or domino effect going on like in the gut. And because I work with a lot of people that have had thyroid stuff and Hashimoto's specifically, Isabella Wentz has some really great work on this about these really high correlations with instances of H. pylori with Hashimoto's specifically. And it makes sense when we look at the autoimmune structure of, an autoimmune expression in the body as a result of having a leaky gut. So some type of digestive dysfunction, inflammation stuff that's going on. Also having a genetic factor, and then a trigger, which triggers could be environmental toxins. They can be gluten, all kinds of things can be triggers essentially. So it makes sense that like H. pylori is one of those common bacteria that we will see with people. And it's interesting too that I work with busy, like health-minded professionals. So usually people that have really busy lives, they travel, quite a bit, they have higher stress jobs. And so H. pylori, I see it in them quite a bit because of that stressful type of lifestyle that they lead in a way. And I mean, my husband is a great example of this. Like he had to go through 3 different H. pylori protocols to actually clear it. And part of the challenge that he was having with that was because of like his work schedule and all the travel and all the historical factors leading up to this, environment within his digestive system that he had to work on healing essentially. Right.
Makes
So
sense.
going back to that concept of like, it's not just this instant right now that this is happening in your body. It's been something that's been accumulating over time. Like our mentor Reed always says with FDN, he says like, what makes you a good host? For something like those gut bugs? Like you've got to look at the bigger picture and all the contributing factors of what makes you a good host.
So true. They're opportunistic, right? And so let's talk about the different ways to test H. pylori, because here's what a couple people might be thinking. Oh, I've done an endoscopy and they didn't find any H. pylori. So let's talk about the flaws of testing and your favorite ways to test for H. pylori.
Yeah. So again, going back to what we said earlier, is a test is any snapshot in time, right? So you just, when you're catching it, whenever you're doing any type of test, like we have to take that in consideration. But as we mentioned earlier, you also have to correlate lab tests back to a person. Yeah. And there are there's different approaches to testing. Just like we have, like with hormone tests, we can do saliva tests, we can do urine tests, we can do blood tests. And all of them can help us find pieces of the puzzle, but there's not necessarily going to be one test that does it all or that is superior to the others, right? So if you're getting an endoscopy, or if they'll do H. pylori breath testing and you're getting negatives from those tests, but you're still experiencing symptoms that highly correlate with something like H. pylori, then you've got to keep going down the line of tests. And I like to start with a stool sample test. Like I love the Diagnostic Solutions, their GI map test, which is a PCR type of test. So it's looking for genetic data, basically. So we can pick up on like, as the shedding happens of the bacteria, it's coming through the stool. So some of those, like an endoscopy is only going to go so far.
Yeah, it's like a bucket in a body of water to see if you collect up like worms or fish. It's like maybe you get it, maybe you don't.
Exactly. Versus like stool is kind of moving through the whole system. So collecting it at some point in time. And I also talk about how there's layers of stuff going on in the gut. So that first stool sample test, we might just be scraping what's on the surface, and maybe H. pylori doesn't come up, but there's correlating symptoms. So I'll take clients through like a a cleaning, like a gut cleansing protocol, clean up some stuff, retest, and then we might see the H. pylori surface, right? So this is where, as FDNs, we're kind of trained in this, to look through this specific lens and understand like what's going on with the body and correlating it back to the person and being these detectives in this kind of way. So, I guess the takeaway here is based on how you're feeling, goes back to what we were talking about. Like, your body better than anybody does. And just because a certain type of lab test comes back and says something is negative, doesn't mean that that's the absolute truth. Yeah. You have to correlate it back to yourself and keep searching if that doesn't feel right for you, basically.
Well said. I mean, it could take years before the test will catch up to what you're dealing with or have been dealing with, right? Autoimmune could take many, many years. Type 2 diabetes, you could have insulin resistance for 10, 20 years before you get your A1C changing to a point where it's a diagnosis for type 2 diabetes. So yes, that is so important. The final thing I want to kind of land the plane with here with you is the liver. I call it the soccer mom organ because it does everything for us. What role, how important is the liver, and why is liver health just in decline, and what can we do? What are some really practical things we can do to support the liver?
Yeah. So I think the liver is probably one of, if not the most important organ in some ways. Like if we were to say prioritize on focusing on one thing, like we got back to that concept of some people feeling overwhelmed by this discussion and going, okay, where can you focus your energy? I think it's the liver is probably the one that I would pick. And I think a lot of people would pick the gut, which is also a very important facet of our health. But ultimately, the liver helps to filter things out from getting into the gut in this way, right? Like toxins and all that stuff. And so I think it is grossly overlooked in a lot of people's, health protocols or like whatever they're doing. And the situation that we are living in today, as I'm sure you've had people come on and talk about, like the toxic load, the environmental toxin stuff that's going on. I mean, statistically, it's like, since World War II, over like 150,000 toxins have been introduced into our environment. Research is showing us now that like our body encounters like 2 pounds of toxins every day type of stuff that's going on. And it's so fascinating because I've talked to traditionally trained health, experts, healthcare types of people, and they go, well, yeah, but why do we need detox support? Because our liver, we have these detox organs, which is true. And the rate at which the toxins have been coming into our environment has superseded our ability to actually evolve like at that rate, right? So because humans live a longer lifespan, the evolution of changes in the body take longer to occur. So, animals or organisms that have shorter lifespans, they evolve and adapt to the environment much faster.
Yeah.
But the rate at which these toxins have been introduced, which has been very fast paced, our body has not actually had time to like evolve from an evolutionary standpoint to be able to handle those things. So there is a tremendous load that's on our liver, not only from an environmental standpoint, but as you talk about a lot, like, the carbs and the sugars. I mean, the standard American diet highly emphasizes carbs and sugars, and the body can only tolerate so much of that. We see like this dietary approach that we've been conditioned to think is right from our government, from whoever, actually is what creates these scenarios of insulin resistance and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I mean, I work with like people that from the outside look healthy. They're not obese. They don't look diabetic. They're exercising, they're doing things, but they actually have like non-fatty liver disease going on because they've been consuming too many carbs and sugars for what their body can tolerate, because that's what they've been conditioned to think is the right type of diet for them. So there's like multiple like layers of things that are going on that result in liver dysfunction. And then we have things like mold, right? And so the liver is so important for helping us to, process like you said, it's the soccer mom. It does all the things. Like it helps us to convert hormones like thyroid, and it helps us to get rid of excess hormones like estrogen, and it helps us to detox and like convert like glucose and glycogen and like all this stuff that it has to do. It needs some extra special attention from us to feel our best.
We need to love the liver. So how do we love this liver of ours? What are some of your favorite ways to do so? Practical ways to do it?
Yeah, well, practically is like, from an external standpoint, how can we reduce the load?
Mm-hmm.
So, we look at like the concept of reducing our exposure to toxins. Again, it can feel really overwhelming. So I like to help people prioritize that. Like there's different phases to move through. So like phase 1 or priority number 1 is anything that goes in your body. So when you're eating something that's toxic, it directly impacts the liver, probably has some of the highest impact on it. So like simplest step, eat organic. Yeah. Let's minimize those toxic exposures from food. Then you can look, okay, what are the things that go on my body would be like priority number 2. So your skincare products, because ultimately that gets absorbed through the skin, the liver metabolizes it. And so again, direct hit to the liver and the body. So let's then make that the next priority. And then the third thing, which is like a really big thing, is like all the environmental stuff, like air quality, house cleaning products, like all the things
Detergents
related to that, detergents, all those types of things, right? So I would say like the process of toxin elimination is a progressive process that happens over a period of time. And I've been doing this for a long time, and it's still in some ways a work in progress. Like the next time I remodel my house, I'm going to be thinking about it in a whole different way and looking at what are non-toxic materials that we can choose from. Or we're at this point where we needed to get a new couch. So I'm going to be looking at what's a non-toxic, fabric couch that I can get to like minimize those toxin exposures. So it's this progressive thing that we do essentially. So minimizing the load in these ways. And then how can we support the liver in its process? So things like, maybe just a liver support supplement, something with like dandelion root, milk thistle, like some of those herbs, N-acetylcysteine, NAC, that's going to support detox pathways, and glutathione recycling is also really great. From a food perspective, incorporating things like beets or dandelion greens or lemons or grapefruits as that fits into the right diet for you. So how does that fit into your carbs for the day? Like balancing those things. Or something as simple as like drinking a cup of dandelion tea every single day can help support the liver in its work. So there's a lot of just simple steps that we can do. And the last thing that I'll mention is the sleep thing again, because our liver does its deepest detox work at nighttime, approximately between the hours of 1 and 3. So we want to be sleeping during that time to allow it to do that work. If we're getting disrupted sleep during that window, it's negatively impacting the liver's ability to like do its job, essentially.
Good point. Yeah, that's where Chinese medicine, that's why they call it liver time, right?
Exactly.
That's a clue, right? If somebody wakes up consistently between 1 and 3 a.m., could point towards your liver, congestion of your liver. So doing some things that you suggested, removing the interference and then adding. So that's the first step, to remove, and then to add in would be the second step. But yeah, like Jen, like you said, you might be on like chapter 15 of this progression. Somebody listening or watching might be on chapter 1. So, just start where you're at and then build from there. You'll learn and grow as you continue to evolve. That's what it's all about. Don't compare your chapter 1 to Jen's chapter 5 or whatever it is. That's a very important lesson that I've learned over the years. I want to ask you, where is the best place for the keto campers watching and listening to follow you, to check you out, to learn about your work?
Yeah, I'm super active over on Instagram. It's my favorite platform to share information. Like all the stuff that we've been talking about today is stuff that I love to talk about regularly over there. I often am giving away things like a toxins checklist to help you evaluate your environment, like we were talking about today. And then once you evaluate that, you can prioritize, okay, I'm going to start knocking things off the list and addressing some of these toxins that are going on in the environment. So that's a great place to come over, connect with me, send me messages, ask me questions about anything that we talked about today. You can also find me on my website, holistichealthboss.com. And holistic is spelled with a W, just like Whole Foods.
Yes, holistic. What is your Instagram handle?
It's Wholistic Health Boss as well too.
Perfect. We'll put that down below. If you're watching on YouTube, down below. If you're listening on the podcast notes. Final question is, we didn't mention this supplement, but I think it's very important. It's my favorite vitamin in the world, vitamin G, gratitude. And I want to ask you, what are you grateful for today, Jenn?
I am so grateful for getting this moment to reflect on the health journey stuff because, as I talk about with clients, as you achieve, different levels of your health, you forget about how bad you used to feel, right? And so
True.
it's so important to take these moments to go to acknowledge yourself for like, wow, I've done a lot of work and I'm in this better place. So thank you, Ben, for giving me this opportunity to share my story and hopefully encourage others to look at like, wherever you're at today, you probably have come a long way too. And maybe there's more to go, but that's okay too, and just like acknowledge yourself for the things that you are doing and then look for those opportunities to just better support yourself to feel like your best self.
Well said. And you're right. It's because I share my story a lot too. I get asked about my story, and every time I share, there's like a piece that I forgot about that. Like when I share it this time, I remembered it. Do you feel the same way when you were asked your story? Is there pieces to it that you forget sometimes to mention?
Totally. Yes.
And it's cool. It is cool to kind of go back and reflect. So I'm glad we gave you that opportunity, and it's very inspiring. If Jenn could do it, anybody could do it. And go check out Jenn's work. We'll put your website below. We'll put your social media down below. And I've got vitamin G for you. I can't wait to see you in person so we can officially give each other some good oxytocin hugs.
I would love that. I'm sure we'll be at some events together coming up soon for the new year.
We will. Thank you so much, Jenn, for coming on the show.
Thank you.